Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Persona 5. Oh man, this, I know Persona games are large. I think my Persona 3 file might have been 80 hours, and Persona 4 was around 80, 90 hours. Persona 5 I finished off, and it was 130 hours. So, basically you would have to play this game straight, like 12 hours a day for a week to beat it. Um, so yeah, it's a massively long game, and maybe longer than the other ones. And so right off the bat, how do I feel about it? Well, I'm a bit mixed because first of all, it is a fantastic game. It is an absolutely fantastic, really well made game. How does it scale up to its previous entries in the series, though, like 3 and 4? I think that 5 may have the worst story, but the best gameplay, and honestly, the best UI I've ever seen. I don't know what it is about like the whole game itself. I mean, there's like there's a cool combat system, there's a cool interface, there's whatever. But there's a certain point in the game where I was playing it, and as a whole, the game felt like more than the sum of its parts or different than the sum of the parts. Like it felt like, oh, this is actually a piece of art with something to say. And I'm going to get to that in a sec because again, the writing and the story, as I said, is kind of the worst part. And, there are certain things in the story that are done really well, and then there are things that immediately just hypocritically like just nullify what they were going for. So so yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, but again, it still has these moments that are really, really impactful. Similar to Persona 3, you now take place in the city, and so they switch it up now. Instead of cards or guns, you use masks to reveal your persona, which I think is actually a very more accurate thing to do, just because personas are literally like masks and faces you wear. That's kind of in classical psychology, that's what they are. The face you show to the world, the face you show to each character. The tarot card system is still here. The arcanas and the personas, how you level up and, get new personas, that's still here. You still have, the old ones like Daisoju, Thor, Seth, all those old guys. They basically remain unchanged since Persona 3. I haven't played Persona 1 or 2. And so I don't know if it goes back even farther when they kind of finalize these designs, but these designs have been basically the same since like the early like 2000s, if not the 90s. They've been cel shaded and kind of updated, and I guess on that point, they did a lot like with the actual combat system. Like I don't remember the last time like past 2012 where I played the sequel in a long series and felt, oh wow, they actually changed a lot. They actually innovated a lot. And it reminds me of this thing where like Nintendo said they're never going to make a new F-Zero until they can figure out a way to innovate. And I mean, that's Nintendo and that's their, spiel and stick, whatever. But it's really interesting. But Persona 5 actually feels like a proper sequel. I don't know. I guess I'm just so used now to gaming becoming this house that just churns out the same game with slightly different few things. But there's a lot of new things in Persona 5. One of them being the way personas act. So one thing I hate and I really like is that now all of the shadows, now all of the creatures or whatever are the shadows, now they're part of like someone's personal cognition, and so they have like different names. And so what's very interesting is that the shadows would just kind of appear in the old games, and then when you actually fought them, they would turn into a certain kind of persona. And so that's still there, but now what's different is that you can actually, they kind of have this weird thing where they don't know you. So in order to actually get that persona, what you can do is you can actually negotiate with them. And so there's all these really cool mechanics that kind of stack on top of each other. So for example, there's things like, you can basically if you hit a persona's weakness, usually you would just do your all-out attack, but now you have two new things. One, you can negotiate for items, you can negotiate for money, and you can negotiate essentially to bring that persona, essentially, and you can negotiate to essentially recruit that persona. And so when you negotiate, you're going to have to go through a series of 2 or 3 dialogues that you have to guess correctly. And again, I'm just so impressed by the scale of mechanics where, like, someone like you get later in the game, like Futaba or other characters, the amount of dialogue or the amount of like mechanics that you actually unlock that help you use these characters is honestly super impressive. What do I mean by that? I mean, seeing things like suddenly increases the chances for your negotiation skills. You can even unlock the money negotiation eventually. There's so much to actually focus on and unlock and actually do that it feels really, really amazing. Like, this game is exceptionally well made. There's other new aspects where of course you have the gun. How could I forget the gun? This is a brand new mechanic, and it actually works really well, especially in the beginning of the game, because it essentially is this tool where you have multiple shots and you do multiple damage. It's a lot weaker than if you just attacked, obviously. But if you have a bunch of enemies on very low health, instead of doing like you want to save your mana, you basically can shoot them all instead of and you can do multiple shots instead of just attacking and doing one by one. Also, firing bullets is also its own unique, what would you say, weakness class or magic class. So there's like normal attacks and then there's bullet attacks, and some enemies, usually flying ones, are very easily susceptible to range attacks. Some other new elements that are also they added, and I don't know if they added in Persona 4 Golden, or at least I don't remember, but there's new things like physio damage, nuclear damage, and I think those were actually the only 2 ones. So, nuclear, physio, and bullets, and firing guns is basically the new kind of thing. And there's this whole this one thing you can unlock where if you sneak up on the enemy, and so that's the other thing now. Oh god, there's just so many new things in here that, like, I felt like this was a real proper sequel to Persona 4, and it's such in a really big way. So yeah, you can basically, when you sneak up on enemies, there's this whole thing where you can sneak around. As long as you're in cover, they can't see you, and then you can ambush them just by pressing X, and it's actually very easy. But of course, people still tend to screw up because if they do see you from far away, they will chase you, and once they see you, there's no way to get unchased unless you go through like a door to another area. They also added all these new cool mechanics where people can do a follow-up attack, so you hit the enemy and someone can jump in, and then you unlock bench follow-up attack. So even if they're not in the battle, they can do a follow-up attack for a small percent chance, which is really, really great. What other new mechanics? Oh, there's this one where you get a Futaba where, like, if you sneak up on the enemy, it'll automatically it'll basically disable the enemy, and you go into the hold up mode immediately, so you can negotiate right from there. There's another kid at the arcade, and he teaches you this one skill where basically if you sneak up on an enemy, you can use basically these gun skills, and you can basically just blast the enemy at the beginning of the match. It feels really, really good. Yeah. So there's a lot more mechanics, a lot of cool new things they added. I think the biggest thing is actually probably Baton Pass. So what they added essentially is that when you get the enemy's weakness, not only do they go down, but now you have the option to immediately switch to another character. So if you take out that enemy's weakness, you can switch to another character that has the right weakness against them, and then they can fight as well. And that sounds really cheap, but honestly, you really need that edge, especially in the late game. But it's fun. Like, this game was designed to be fun. I don't know how else to describe it. I can't remember the last time a game actually tried to do something new and ambitious and interesting, and while also like innovating its like original formula. This is not just Persona 4. Again, this is a proper sequel, and it's really, really impressive to see. On that point, though, I guess I might as well get to it. The story and the characters. I don't know. I just don't feel the story was that, and like, it's not bad for sure, but they do this whole thing where it's like society and adults are wrong, and we, a bunch of kids, need to basically take out the adults and basically, reform society. And, there are certain arcs. Like the first arc is kind of like, okay, you're getting acclimated to this world and everything that happens in it. Something I should also mention is that in the previous games, they got into the other world via the school, then the TV, and now, of course, it's smartphones because everyone has a smartphone now. And so they have an app that they go in, and thank God for once they actually named the main character. They actually named him Joker rather than the other guys who were just like nameless protagonists. Even when they had their crossovers in Super Smash Brothers, they just had like they called them Persona 3 protagonists. There's like an unofficial slash official, manga name for each character, but with Joker, it was no confusion. And I guess on that point, I really now appreciate Joker being in Smash Brothers because it feels like what's really impressive to me is how much they fit the aesthetic of Joker's character. And the fact that Joker is very iconic and has a distinct skill set, of vibe, and everything. And it really makes sense, like his skill set and aesthetics, and like when he wins the match and he gets the results screen. I think that's actually really cool. Now, I always kind of appreciated the aesthetic from afar, but actually playing the game, it was like, whoa, this is actually really cool. On the aesthetic point, really quickly, like again, the UI in this game is beautiful. It is so well done, and it understands the classical, what I like, which is two-tone aesthetics, where it's basically you just revert everything to either two colors, like usually white, red, and black. You can have or black and or white and green or something, but you can usually have black and white in the same image, but usually you just stick to one color, and I love that, and it looks so cool. When you go to Takemi the doctor, she has this whole DNA strand thing revolving around her. You also have what really kind of hit me was the gun guy. When you go to the gun store and all of the characters' names are dog tags, I just thought, oh, that's so cool. Like, along with the music too. The music in this game is phenomenal. By the end of the game, you are kind of bashing your head a little bit where some of these songs come on about like the quirky theme or the villain theme. You're like, I've heard this a bajillion times. I kind of wish I had something else. But the main theme, the heist theme, and the main battle theme are just really good. Like, you'll never see it coming. And the main one, Life Will Change or something, is phenomenal. And it's funny because I've heard these songs for almost a decade. The game's 10 years old now almost, and I always appreciated them, but until I played, and I thought they were okay, but until I played the game and I saw how they were integrated into the gameplay, it makes so much sense. It's so well done. For example, so Life Will Change one, they only do that when you go into heist mode. So the whole aspect is that so the kids are basically, they realize they can go into this weird metaverse. They can go inside these distortions of people's hearts called palaces. And when someone has this big ego, or essentially this big distortion, they essentially have to go in and defeat their shadow inside the distortion in order to make, change their heart. And just, I guess, on that point alone, that's actually my biggest problem with this version of the game, or this game in general, is that it's such a huge takeaway or a change from Persona 4, where it was like, look, everyone needs to confront their own shadow and integrate it into themselves, and that's how you unlock your persona. Here, they just get all shown and angry and get mad. And Persona 4, essentially, it's really based on Jungian psychology, and that to me is so important, so interesting, and more authentic. While this one, it feels more kind of a step back in that aspect, where like, oh, here's an evil guy. How do we change his heart? We beat the crap out of him. It's just that's just not how things work, And Persona 4 is much more nuanced, where someone needs to confront something about themselves, an evil version of themselves, but at the same time, it's not something that's evil or bad. It's just like, that's just how they are. That's just who they are, essentially. And there's nothing else you can really do about it. And you just have to accept that you have the potential for evil inside yourself. And of course, the Phantom Thieves grow throughout the story, and they of course end up being, villains themselves or villainized at some point. The worst part is when Ryuji's like, oh, I want to become famous. And as soon as that happens, they become a target and they lose all their fame, kind of like, like a Batman, like a Dark Knight, like you live long enough to see yourself the villain kind of thing, except they're still just idiot kids. But anyway, they have to go inside the palaces and fight the distortions. And so you basically have to make your way through the palace. And this is the biggest change, I think, is that if I recall correctly in the previous games, there were like areas where you would go and you'd fight like shadows, but they would just be a series of like different dungeon crawlers. Essentially, it was just like Tartaros, but themed differently for each kind of area or boss or whatever, or inside the TV world. And so in this one, no, it's like every character, every villain, essentially, you know, they have their own level and it has its own architecture. It's not just copy pasted; it's actually designed this time. So you actually have to go through it, and it's really really interesting and really well done. Um, but of course, no, you basically have to steal their treasure, and when you get to the final part of the mission, that's when they play the heist mode song, Life Will Change. But the thing I love about it is that it never stops playing. And they also do this special effect where like the wind is like swirling or something, or maybe like there's just more. Oh, of course, because the screen is red, all the enemies are on high alert. I love that. Like that is to me the Persona 5 moment. Like that is the one experience that only this game can give. And to give just a brief summary of like what leads up to that moment and throughout the gameplay loop. So basically, of course, like the old Persona games, you have your life divided into your personal life and your dungeon life. And honestly, there's some dungeon in this game where I'm just like, I just want to get back to school life, which honestly is kind of more rewarding. Because you know, in your school life, you have your ability to upgrade your skills, your ability to talk to certain characters essentially, and level up your social links and get their personal little like mini story, along with getting the benefits that come along with doing that. You also have the ability to go and get certain healing items or certain weapons for the next boss fight or whatever, and regroup. You also have the ability, they also have mementos in this world, which is kind of like Tartarus, their version of Tartarus, but it actually links into the story later on, which is really interesting at the very end of the game. And you also have the ability to essentially explore the world, again, level up yourself or level up your relationship with your friends. And again, on a philosophical level, I love what Persona, gives you, which is essentially that look. You need to be able to manage your time. Every day you have the ability and opportunity to do something specific. And, that allows you essentially to, manage your time wisely and correctly. And, yeah. And then, of course, you're divided into dungeon life. And so the way the dungeon life works is, well, I mean, overall, the dungeon is basically you need to get to steal the treasure that is the source of the distortion in the person's heart, which is essentially at the end of each level. And then once you get there, you can then send your calling card and initiate the final fight. So the way it works is the Phantom Thieves, they defeat their enemy essentially. They run into usually a new teammate who is being abused by another kind of character or this, elite in part of society. Who I think they also represent one of the deadly sins like greed and lust, etc. And so this character will then essentially, you'll meet him, interview him, and basically try to help this new character. They become part of your team. You end up going to this person's palace, and each time you have to guess, the person's name, the location, where they, are, and the name of their delusion. So if they think of their place as a tomb or a castle or whatever, and then once you do all that kind of dialogue and that narrative and that story, you can then unlock their palace. You go in there, you confront their shadow, you find out how evil they are. The person that is being abused somehow sneaks in with you or gets tagged along, and they end up essentially, fighting, awakening to their persona by making a deal, making a contract to have the power to defeat this person. And then after that, you basically have to do a little tutorial intro, then you have to leave, and then you have again like 20 days until a deadline, or else something will happen in order to beat that entire boss or dungeon or level or whatever. And so then once you kind of make your way, through the level, and each level has its own theme song, which is also really cool. I think the worst one is probably the Okumura one, where it's this Amazon workplace force, and it's just hard techno, and it's really, really hard to listen to, basically. And so you basically go through that entire level, and you're running low on SP, which is your main lifeblood, really. And if you make it to the end of the level, eventually, by the end of the day, or you have to retreat, and as you go through each area, it has its own special kind of puzzle, along with a new level of personas that you can fight and shadows that you can fight, and also recruit personas. And then you have some kind of gimmicky puzzle that is specific to that area. And once you do that, you get to the very end. Then you'll not confront the boss yet, but you'll basically find their treasure, or where their treasure should be. And so then you have to leave. Then you send a calling card, which basically says the Phantom Thieves are going to change your heart. And you send it to that person, and they get, really defensive. And this idea that they're going to lose their most valuable thing, and that they're going to be transformed, to be innocent, essentially allows this treasure to manifest. And then you go back into the delusion in the palace. And that's when it plays Life Will Change throughout the entirety of the raid. And during the raid, you basically go to where the treasure is and have the final boss fight. Sometimes there's a special little extra part of the level where you have to fight. But what I did specifically is that I enjoyed the game so much and that theme so much, that what I decided to do was I went through the entire level. Even though you can warp to the end boss zone, I went through the entire level because it's kind of like this victory lap where like you have stronger gear, stronger friends, you're able to go through the whole thing and cheese all the enemies, and it's kind of like a victory lap thing. And it feels really, really good. That whole experience of going through and basically speedrunning the same area feels really good. And it makes me think about how New Game Plus should be handled, where like, again, I was really disappointed because I didn't get all my social links up. Obviously, I always make the same mistake every Persona game, and I always forget. But I always miss out on my social links, and I was some close to really getting like high, thing. And so Persona 5 does have a New Game Plus, but you have to start all your social links all over again because if some of them are time sensitive, obviously. So unless you got them to level 10, then you get all the perks. And so my problem is that even though I can go back and do a new game, I've already put 130 hours into this. I want to see how these character stories ends, but I don't want to put in that much time. Again, obviously. And even though you can skip cutscenes, you can fast forward conversations, but you can't skip conversations. And there are way more conversation things in game than there are cutscenes. And so, like, you can spend half an hour just skipping through cutscenes and, like, just to get back to, the initial part where I was actually free as my character. So it's, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to go back and play it because, again, I mean, the gameplay is again, really, really good, very satisfying. It's really fun when you encounter a new enemy. You basically use a series of moves to figure out what their weakness is, recruiting new personas, finding out new moves, and basically going throughout this big epic story where everything feels really good in terms of progression and going towards a final goal. On that point, though, so once you beat the final boss of the palace, you steal their treasure, you have a change of heart, and then the deadline will come along, and then you have some time, usually, to do social stuff until that deadline happens. At which point, then you have a big story moment where that person confesses to all their crimes, and then you go on to the next arc where you find a new recruit and it just repeats over. But yeah, from a gameplay perspective, it feels very satisfying with the music, figuring out weaknesses, etc. It feels really, really cool when you get a new social link and they give you some special power like, extra EXP or extra money or like a new move or a special like technique or something. You're like, oh, I can't wait to try that out. And so really you want to maximize your time in both areas, and like really balancing everything is really difficult. And so I kind of had an average score of like 5 for like every character all around. But I felt like I should have focused on getting 10s more, because then those perks actually carry over to the next playthrough. But again, I don't have it in me right now to do another 130-hour playthrough. It definitely wouldn't be that long because now I can skip all the cutscenes essentially. But again, still, you can't actually skip all of them because it's whatever. And then I have to redo all my social links again. And that's just honestly just painful because I averaged out most of my people. I guess on that point, maybe something that people didn't like about this game as much as previous Persona games is the characters. They're fine, but like I could tell Haru was just not interesting at all. Makoto was okay. Anne was just like okay again. Like, oh, she's like, oh, I'm sexually harassed. Like, oh no, because you're hot. I mean, she's fine. I mean, they're all fine. They're not bad at all. But like, when I think about to Junpei and Yukari and even Fuka and Akihiko, like that cast was so well written and so solid. And I don't know, the most real moment in the entire Persona series is Junpei yelling at himself for not studying for his exams. I don't know. I think that's something everyone can relate to, like Stupe. So yeah, the characters, they're fine, they're good, but they just don't hit as hard as the previous characters in the series. And I mean, to that point, I wasn't really super warm on the Persona 4 characters either. Like Yosuke was, okay, and I'm gonna call him Ryuji, but the other like blonde, I feel like a lot of these guys are kind of recycled from Persona 4 a little bit. You know, yeah, honestly, I think Persona 3 actually had the strongest squad when I really think back on it. But I think I do have. I always have a favorite social link. In 3, it was Toriyumi, your homeroom teacher, who was actually playing an MMO with you. That to me was like the most cherished moment. I really, really loved that entire arc. It was really, really nice. And Persona 4, my favorite social link was, you know what? I'm not actually sure, but I think I'm going to go with the Dying Man. I think that was just really a really interesting, like story to tell about this guy with cancer who was dying on this bench, and the autumn leaves are falling, and even though he's going to be gone, he's like, why bother talking to me? It was just a really interesting, set to go through. And in 5, hands down, Kamikawa or Kawakami is my favorite. The homeroom teacher again, because she's this maid and she's super useful because you can do all these chores and whatever, without spending time on them. And I really like her because she just has a really interesting dynamic personality where she's your homeroom teacher. She's also a sexy maid who also hates her life. And then she also she'll come over and just lie down and just chill out and be like, I just came here because I want to be bored. She'll kind of take advantage of you. And she's also highly empathetic, so she has to essentially pay out, essentially the student killed himself or something, and so she felt responsible, and so she's so guilty she keeps paying the family, and then the family started abusing her, saying you have to pay more, and that's why she's taking the second job as maid. She's just a really interesting, diverse character. She has so many different personalities, and I just don't know what to expect from her. She's such an interesting character, and again, I'm really angry because I didn't get her to level 10. I got her up there, but at a certain point, I think some people are just locked from getting level 10 with, and like the politician, obviously, if you go past the election, you can't level him up to full. So, yeah, I don't know. No, she's really useful, and she's also just a very interesting character. I also like the shogi player. The kid at the other arcade was his rewards are really good, but he is just not super interesting to go through. And again, that's the thing. All the main cast and characters, Ryuji is oh, I know the chariot, arcana. He's oh, I used to run track and then I got too tired. Now I can't run track anymore. Gee, I wonder where this is gonna go. It's just I don't know. All the main characters feel kind of one, maybe two notes, throughout most of the story, and they're just not super interesting, which is just really unfortunate. Joker himself, I think it's really interesting they gave him a voice. He'll say certain things when he's attacking. So I think Joker's design, his attitude, I really like him. He's definitely he feels kind of a combination of the past two characters, the past two main characters, honestly, which is kind of neat. And again, the one thing I guess, like again, like they just recycled this from Persona 4, which is the final boss, which is like this collective unconscious enemy, and it's kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool, I guess. But it was kind of like it didn't really resonate with me as much as the fourth game. I don't know. I want to go back and rewatch the ending just to like, figure out why. Because in four, it was like it made sense why it was doing what it was, because it was just this entity, this like evil god. While in this thing, it also is like an evil god, but it's also like it's controlling people as well, and then you basically have to stand up to that. So there's this whole theme of rebellion in this game, and so the whole tone of the game I felt is just kind of targeted towards kind of a younger audience, in the sense that, oh, all adults and society is bad and we must fight them. And it's funny because of course you have some adults that of course are their friends and their guardians, but it's this very, like, I think it is funny that the character's named Joker, and it's really like society. Like it is literally, they say they want to cause social reform and change the world. And of course, the more they get close to that goal, the more they like arouse the ire of like these politicians. And again, just on that point too, I think the best arc is probably Madarame, because they kind of have such a tight squad. It's 4 or 5 characters. And what I love about Madarame is that he seems like a good guy, pretty much, even though like his whole twist is that he's stealing his students' art and using it as his own. But he's still like encouraging a lot of art, and so there's a lot of things about him that I think make him the most redeemable villain in the game, because he's still making art. And encouraging others to make art, even though he's kind of abusing them. He was, out of all the villains, the one that was like, I mean, this guy is bad, but he's not that bad, you know. Um, and and the rest of them just feel so lame. Like the rest of them are just like, yes, I like money. I like power. I am corrupt. There's no depth to their characters, and I don't know what to say about that, because there is nothing to say. And especially when you get to the final villain, Shido, it's like, okay, so he's using the metaverse to like, you know, control people's minds and cause them to mentally shut down and stuff. And it's like, all right, like he's an ambitious guy. Like his sin is ambition or pride, I guess. But like, I just wish there was more to the character. Like, he's just an asshole. Like there's he's not really evil. He's just an asshole. And even then, when you get to the final boss, of course, Persona is always used to doing demiurge style bosses. And again, like, I don't know, I think back to Persona 3, how you have to fight the embodiment of nihilism, and here you're fighting the embodiment of like the human unconscious, which is also controlling them, and it's this godlike figure. And again, the thing is that this godlike figure is the same as Shido. It has this pride like nonsense where it believes it can just control people. So it doesn't feel different or interesting from like the last part. It was kind of like, oh, here's just this entity that is evil, or just an asshole, really. It's just very arrogant. It's not actually this thing of evil that like it's evil, but it's not, you know. If I were to do it or redo it, I would have this thing that essentially is feeding off human souls and is the source of all negative human thought, and it doesn't have motivation to control humanity. It simply just is, which is, I think, which was more so what Persona 4 did, which I think is just more interesting. But it felt like I was just fighting Shido again, and I also think they just used distorted Shido's voice for like this godlike creature. And then, of course, you have this whole, you know, it's all very anti-authority, which again is fine, but it's just, I don't know, it just feels very cliche, is what I'm driving at. And so even at the end, you have this whole thing where you're like, oh, like he's like God, and you summon your final persona, and it's like, you know, a devil or something, and it shoots the, you know, God in the face. It's like, oh wow, take that, society. Like, I'm gonna fight God, I'm gonna fight society and bring it down. And it's not like it's anti-religious because there's a character who literally like is in a church, and the church serves a really cool function where you can actually go to the confessional pew and you can actually spend time there to recall lost moves through your persona that you accidentally overwrit because you only have like 8 slots. And some of these moves are really, really powerful and interesting. But yeah. So again, and the writing and the story, that's why people say this has the weakest story, because it feels a little bit shonen ish, it's like, okay, we're just gonna take down the bad guy because he's bad. It's not like there's a nuanced thing where you're making him look at his own perception, his own shadow, and confront it. And they even screwed this up kind of with Futaba, because Futaba's whole gist is that and she's another character that I thought would be really interesting. Like, she's the gamer girl. She's really fun to hang out with. And she was, kind of, but not as much as, like, Toriyumi in 3, for example. But Futaba confronts her own shadow, but her shadow acts more like her conscience. It's like, hey, you have to remember the truth in the past. Like, Futaba's shadow is good. And that's like, no, that is not what we established in Persona 4. Like, the shadows are... like they're the source of all your negative thoughts, and you need to accept them. And here the shadow is kind of like conscious that is guiding Futaba to like realize her inner worth, while the cognitive version of her mother acts more like the shadow and says, you killed me and all this stuff, and like you should die and whatever. So I don't know, just thematically, that's just wrong. That's not how a shadow acts like. So it's very inconsistent. There are other things too where, the Phantom Thieves, they win, they take out the bad guy, and then there's another bad guy, and he's like, the Phantom Thieves. And the one thing I just hate about the story, honestly, is the fact that they become so popular so fast. Like, after they take out the artist guy, Madarame, by the second, like, act, they're already in the news, like, what are the Phantom Thieves will do next? Like, no, you don't look at this stuff. It progressed way too quickly until it goes to like the national level. And yeah, I don't know. It was just way too much. And the worst part out of all of this, I think, is probably the twist at the end, where you finally loop back to the beginning of the game and you finally find out the twist as to what happens with Joker in the interrogation room. And it is the biggest ass pull I have ever seen. Just the biggest fiction, like, crap writing, like, beyond Deus Ex Machina. Like, Deus Ex, no, this, like, what I love is every single character in the game explains how they played a role in this and how it makes sense to them, but there's just so many plot holes in it. Like, how did they even make a metaverse version of Joker in Sai-san's mind? Like, how do they know that would actually exist there in her mind? How did they make her create that? And just the timing and everything is like, I use GPS coordinates it's stupid. It is stupid. It is dumb. No. But I almost forgive it, because again, the game is really good. But it was so, because the thing is too, you can look at Goro Akechi and realize, this is like Light Yagami if he was L. Like, it's very obvious, right? To me, at least. And the whole thing just feels like, just like, all right, whatever. Like, he's just so predictable. I don't know. And he meets his demise just like Light. And just the fact, he's a famous, youth detective. He's so famous and whatever. It's like, this kid isn't anything. He wouldn't be famous. And yeah. And then you get to the end of the game. It's like, okay, I'm ready for the big finale. And it feels like, I don't know, it felt like I really love the design of the shadows and the environments and the dungeon and like the last area. But it just felt like padding. Like, we're going to, like, because the whole thing is like, Morgana's like, we need to go to Mementos, because this entire time Morgana's like, who's the cat character, I don't know who I am. I think I'm human, but I turn into a normal cat when I go back to the real world and whatever. And Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of like, you know. And it's like we need to explore Mementos, and it's like, why? Because I have a feeling something's down there. And you go down there, and like, yeah, there's this giant, cup of greed, or this giant chalice, essentially this holy grail that is turning people into sloth, essentially. And so that's what I don't like about it. It's forcefully taking people's energy away rather than being the source of negative thoughts, pushing it into them, which is again what the id and the shadow and the collective unconscious is kind of supposed to be. I love the design and the aesthetic and the idea of an eternal subway system leading down to hell, but I don't know. It just felt like this is another boss we just need to fight. Why? Because reasons. Why? Because we're the Phantom Thief. Why? Because we want to get famous and then regret it later. Like it's I don't know. It just doesn't really hit that strongly. While with 3, I mean, oh my god. I mean, 4 itself was always really like cool how this was the source of the collective unconscious. It was the collective unconscious, and 3 you have to fight nihilism, and the end part where the protagonist has to sacrifice himself. I don't know why they bring that back. That is the most Kino Christ like it was so cool. The best moment, and it was a huge moment, a weird crazy revelation. And with 5 it's just like it's like whatever, so like it's just like this is another thing we have to fight, and the reason behind you fighting this thing isn't and what I hate about it is Morgana, spoilers, finds out that he's like, I think I was born in the underworld, or I think I was a shadow or something, or was born here. It's like, yep, he represents the last bit of humanity's hope, because they have again another switcheroo that Igor was actually fake this whole time, and I realized that his voice was like way deeper in this game rather than the other games, and so this Igor was actually an imposter, an evil Igor who ends up becoming this collective unconscious thing. So I guess after 4, there was a new collective unconscious that attacked Igor, who's the god of this world. And again, though, I love the concept of the Velvet Room, essentially where you have this journey with the tarot cards you have to go through, and Igor is kind of your guide along with his companion. And so these characters essentially end up arriving at some kind of conclusion, and you develop and grow as a person, and you develop your true persona and your relationships. And that to me is kind of the main aspect of the games. And I think what's really cool is that in the first, or in the 3 they did a elevator, and 4 they did a limo, 5 they actually did a jail cell. It's not moving or on a journey, you are rehabilitating. And so it's all based around society and rules and jail and who's right and who's wrong. And I think the problem is that this game is more focused on power. And I think that's the big shift that you saw kind of at around 2012, is that stories about good versus evil shifted around things about power. It's like, oh, this thing is, yeah, it's kind of evil, but it's also just powerful, and that's why we're taking it out. And the justifications for like why these things, like the worst one is Okumura. Like it shows 2 scenes with the guy where he's like he's overworking his workers, and it's like, okay, I guess. And then you defeat him, and you actually like he ends up dying, and Haru at that point is under the impression that you guys killed him because you did this thing, even though he was assassinated by Goro Akechi. She doesn't know that, so she like in a way like killed her own father. Like she should be really guilty, and she's like, yeah, they killed him, it's okay, I shrug it off. And like she went into this whole new world where she had no idea what's going on, and she was like, again, she did it because she didn't want to get married to this guy. It's like, okay, I get it, but still her personality did not change at all after her father died, and it almost feels a little bit creepy that way. Like she's still this cute, nice little girl. Like, oh yeah, my father's dead. Haha. I don't know. So yeah, there's a lot of big ass pulls in this game. I think peak of 3 was The final fight, this Shojiro as well, this idea that you have, a little bit of time to like find your purpose. Four's peak was probably, finding out who the murderer was. And again, that was kind of like underwritten, I felt, with Adachi, but they kind of, I think they made it better in Golden, but I never played Golden. But I still, even though it was underwritten, I still really, really enjoyed it. And in this game, it was, yeah, it just that final moment, that final end boss, it's like, why are we fighting this thing? Like, it honestly felt like filler at that point. It's like, yeah, okay, it's taking people's desires and making them not want to believe in the future or something, but and it also wants to control humanity, and it's evil, I guess, but they don't really take a lot of time. And it's also Igor, who was impersonating Igor this whole time, and if Igor hadn't been impersonating and helping you this whole time, then you wouldn't have gotten strong enough to use your personas, because apparently there was some big meta thing where it was actually behind the scenes the whole time, making sure you and Goro Akechi would fight each other and find out who's strongest. Like, I don't know, it didn't go anywhere. It was just kind of like, okay, I guess that's the reason why. So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of shrugged at the end. I'm like, okay, I guess that's the ending. And then again, I was really pissed because I didn't get my social links up, because I didn't realize it was Christmas when everything ends. And maybe I do this every Persona game, but I don't realize when the game is actually ending, because they were like, oh, yeah, his, the election is on the 17th. And then you're good, you're free. It's like, oh, great, I have all this time. I guess Persona 5 figured out that, in this version of the game, we're going to give the player a reward all the time to just discover the social links. I don't have to go through all this stuff again. I just wanted to get the personal story of the people. I just want to know how, the story for this character ends, the story for that character ends. I don't care really about the buffs or anything. I just want the ability to go through all those stories without having to play the entire game again. And it's like, no, you have to. And to that point, I really wouldn't mind that if it just let me like jump to a certain point in time where I don't have to rewatch all these cutscenes. If it just let me go to a certain point and just put me back in the gameplay rather than having me watch cutscenes that I don't care to watch, I would do New Game Plus, like, no question. If they just let me go literally to a point where I can start grinding on my social links again, I'd be good. But they don't do that, so oh well. But yeah, still, I wouldn't say the best soundtrack. I mean, they're all great soundtracks, but the way they use the soundtracks in the gameplay and in the battles and how it transitions and it uses the music is peak. It is so well done. And again, there's nothing like Persona. It's probably one of the best RPGs / non-RPGs. It has 4 guys in a row. They're using magic and attacks, but the way it approaches things and its social links and everything else just feels so different from everything else. We're like, okay, we're gonna have a wizard, a knight, and whatever in a row. Like, no, you have these characters that are supposed to be, definitely well written, and honestly, they are than other RPGs. But compared to other Persona games, it was still just my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. I still really enjoyed this game. It was a lot of fun playing it. It was a great experience. It was a long ass game though, 130 hours. Oh, I'm exhausted. I mean, I love the music, but I don't think I can listen to it anymore. But to that point, I was enjoying it. I did enjoy it for the entire game though. So the music is solid enough to keep you there for the whole game. And again, the aesthetics, the gameplay is just it's such a distinct experience, and it's something that comes together as a whole at the end of the game. It's not just, oh, this is a social simulator, this is a RPG combat simulator, this is the cool aesthetic. It is a very distinct work of art that I think transcends its components, and that's what really shocked me, because when I went into Persona 5, I didn't think I played for like an hour and I'd be like, okay, whatever. But it really got to me. Like, I'm like, this is actually really good, and I really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, and that's mainly because of the gameplay. Making turn-based gameplay fun is hard, but I think Persona pulls it off with style, and style is the name of the game. And a lot of people have said this is style over substance, which is true when you're talking about other Persona games, but if you had to stand this up against another average RPG, this absolutely slaughters it. All the Persona games, and to the point, like they've kind of had this new model where I think after Persona 3, they made Persona 3 FES. Persona 4 was a massive, massive hit. And so they had Golden, but they also had like the dancing game. And it's kind of like they make this one game that just defines a whole generation. And what I also love about it is that each one is color themed. So you have 3 that is blue, 4 that is yellow, and 5 that is red. And so each one just has a distinct vibe. And then because they've become so popular, like you just have a bunch of spin-off games. So there's Persona 5 Strikers and Q and Tactica and whatever. And also on that point, something that I don't think people probably did catch up on this, but pick up on this, but there's a lot of French literature and a lot of French themes. I mean, Coffee Leblanc, the fact that Arsène is based off Lupin Arséne's novels or something, or Arsène Lupin. I forget exactly which order it comes in. And then in Tactica, it like has this whole French Revolution thing. So there's a lot of French influence in this game, I guess you could say, or at least they read a lot of French literature for this game. And they try to make it very sexy, and that's the kind of energy of Persona 5. It's trying to be very sexy, which it is. Like the animations, the transitions. One last thing maybe I'll say before I kind of hang this down, because this is getting an egregiously long video, probably as long as Persona 5 itself. But the anime cutscenes are really bad in this game. They're very, very stilted, and they're moving at a very low FPS. Like I don't mind anime in games, and I think I don't know, maybe I have to go back and watch the old anime cutscenes of 3 and 4, which I thought were fine. Maybe there's just so few of them I didn't notice, but the ones in 5, there were quite a few of them, and the anime like quality is just really, really low and very noticeably bad. Like characters will kind of move and they'll stop, and that like they really pulled that budget, because a character will just stare at a screen for like a good few seconds and do nothing. But whatever. I mean, I guess they wanted to. Also, I love the intro, and in fact, I love the intro so much I made the decision to play the original version instead of Royal. And there's some weird things with the original edition, like because of they didn't want the game to be spoiled or something, they actually blocked the share button function, so you can't take screenshots or record gameplay for Persona 5 like base, but I assume you can do that for Royal. But there's just some things about like just small things that I don't like about Royal, because I did my friend let me play it. The fact that the thing is, the main menu is now in the city instead of in the subway, which is more like tonally appropriate. And the biggest thing for me is that the intro is different. Like I love the intro for Persona 5. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's right in the right tone, in the right music, everything. And in Royal, even though they added Futaba, they changed the friggin' intro to be like in this full color, not tonally appropriate at all, different song. It is, and you can't like change it or reset it or anything. Like it completely defeats the purpose, in my opinion. So stupid. But in any case, and the other reason too is that honestly, like my PS4 is like filled to the brim with memory. So I like Persona 5 was like 20 gigs and the Royal was like 35. And that actually made a difference to me. So that was like another reason I went for the original version. But yeah, 5 is I guess I can recommend it, but it's just something where like I think the fact that the social links kind of stuck up on you, because after the election, you're like, oh, I have time, and then suddenly it's Christmas, and Morgana's like, we have to go to Mementos now. And I thought, okay, cool, we'll get out of Mementos to Christmas. Because for some reason, I had this memory of like, yeah, you have like a Christmas date and like a New Year's party, the old Persona games, and you still keep playing. No, that was it. That was like the end point. Like, oh, all right. And then I was actually so upset. I reloaded my last save right after the second last, boss, whatever. And I basically entered into that that last arc, I said, okay, I was just gonna focus on like one person, get all my Persona links with them. And I couldn't do it. It's like all the characters were on their own schedule, and it's like I went through and said, okay, I'm gonna optimize this now because I know when it ends, and I still couldn't get level 10 with like quite a few characters, to the point where it's like, you know, I was like, they're so close. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, because on certain days they just won't be available. By the time you're in that last stretch, only certain characters are available then, and you just cannot like help those people. They're just gone. Like, I think Kawakami, for whatever reason, she's just not available in the last month at all. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I was doing something wrong. Maybe I have to like focus on her for like the whole game, like, and just whatever. But I remember in 3 and 4, I got like almost all my teammates to level 10. And I just got to see all the transform personas, and in this game I didn't get any of them. Like, I was close to getting Ryuji, but you get Morgana for free. But yeah, it was I don't know, it was weird. Yeah, it was very frustrating. Sorry, is what I meant to say. But also, again, very weird. Like, why would they make it like this? Like, they want to encourage you to do multiple playthroughs, but also make it really hard. Like, God, I think the worst one was actually Resident Evil 8 on a new game plus, because it makes you do like 30 minutes of unskippable dialogue and cutscenes. New Game Plus, if you're gonna do it, New Game Plus needs to be a speedrun mode. That's my thing. You should be able to skip everything, jump to a certain point in time, etc. Nier Automata does this very well, where you can just like jump to any chapter and be like, okay, cool, let's go. But yeah. Anyway, guys, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I don't want to make this video longer than it has to be. Still a really enjoyable experience. I still enjoyed the characters. By the end of the game, Morgana actually warmed up to me a lot more. I really enjoyed, again, the doctor, your homeroom teacher, a lot of characters. I like how they did the world so it doesn't feel overwhelming, how you have too many things to do, but you have just enough things to do. I mean, it was better in 4 and 3, where it was like, or more so 4 because it was in the countryside, like, okay, there's specifically this area essentially. And yeah, I just wish this game, the Persona game, focused more on the characters and made them more well written than focusing on power struggles, because we come to Persona more so for that. But honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of like a drop in the bucket. This is still a really amazing, unique experience. And again, the best part of this game is the heist mode, where suddenly you can do your victory lap through the entire level and go to the boss, and it plays the victory theme. And I think one of the best things about games is that the music really shapes the experience so much, to such a degree it's almost unfair. There are certain games where I didn't like them at all, or rather, if I played them mute or without any music, it would just not be the same experience at all. And so it wouldn't be the same experience at all. Like, music is just so integral to a game that without it, it really just changed a lot. And Persona 5 music is really, really good. In fact, I've seen a lot of, I just saw a crossover with like some Sonic PC fan game with a Persona mod on it. And I felt like, those two fan bases are kind of more similar than we think, the Persona and Sonic fan base, because the music in them drives the emotion and the energy of the games. But yeah, I think that's all I can really say about it this time. I've been talking for way too long about this, adding another hour into the bucket of the pool that Persona 5 has stolen from me. But yeah, I actually played the modern Persona game. It was not as bad as I thought. It was actually really, really good, and I actually enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to Persona 6. I don't know if it's gonna be green or maybe black or white. I don't know, but orange maybe. But I'm really excited to see what comes from them next, if they can pull it off. But yeah, that is Persona 5. I will see you later, guys. Bye.